I want to bring in NBC's Monica Alba at the White House. Eddie Glaude is a Princeton University professor and MSNBC political analyst. Jess O'Connell was CEO of the DNC and executive director of Emily's List. So, Jess, what of her closing argument do you think will work best in these closing 6 days as she hits those battleground states? What resonates?
Well, I think a number of things stood out last night. First of all, when you're within a week to Election Day, to this big moment that we've all been sort of lurching forwards to, I think it matters how we feel. And I think what happened last night and what Kamala Harris and her team pulled together last night in Washington, D.C. on the Ellipse in such an important place that takes us back to where Donald Trump was on January 6th. What they did was the style and substance of that speech, the way she looked, the way it was framed, and what she talked about, her journey into this, her journey to this moment, the work that she intends to do, and how the difference is so stark, I think really is about the feels right now. We're really about inspiring and turning out the people that she needs to turn out and going after, as you said, a few of those persuadables, people that are still figuring out how they feel about this whole thing. Believe it or not, there still are some. And I think last night did nothing but help.
So she is on the stage right now. We have a picture of that in Raleigh, North Carolina. And she just said, make no mistake, Eddie, we will win. Well, she didn't say Eddie. She said, make no mistake, we will win. But Eddie, this, I think, was bigger than a vision for policy, right? It was a vision for America at large, a kind of cultural shift. And I want to play specifically something she said that made me think about that.
America, for too long, we have been consumed with too much division, chaos, and mutual distrust. And it can be easy then to forget a simple truth. It doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way.
And I also thought she kind of redefined what it means to be a patriot. We're used to thinking of people who fought in wars. She mentioned Normandy as patriots, Eddie, but then she mentioned Selma and Seneca Falls and Stonewall. Do you think that this kind of broader, more cultural message can move people who are still worried about the economy or immigration?
I think it both and, because she did. First of all, it's great to see you, Chris.
You too.
She also said that, and then she transitioned to policy issues that will address those economic questions, right? Child care credit, right? The way in which she talked about the opportunity economy and broke it down in very detailed form. But I think it's really important for us to understand that that she's offering us a way of imagining ourselves differently, apart from the ugliness of the last decade or so. And that is up to us. You know, the freedom is not only freedom to choose, the freedom of the right over our own bodies, but freedom comes with it a responsibility. That's why we've said over and over again, following John Dewey and others, that democracy must be reimagined, must be defended every generation. And so she put that choice, that burden, that responsibility on us, but she did it with a kind of joy that was shall we say, compelling.
She put her foot to the pedal, that's for sure, and is keeping it there, Monica. 3 battleground states today. Tell us about that.
I think you can expect to hear this same message that was so carefully crafted for last night, amplified today to these specific audiences. And so you see her there speaking, and later when she heads to Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, she's going to be repeating some of these lines and these key ideas that emerged from those remarks last night, like turning the page on what she said and called and framed as Donald Trump's divisiveness and his division, trying to argue that she views Donald Trump as somebody who's obsessed with revenge and with seeking unchecked power, and she is going to say that that is not who she is, and certainly not who, in her words and her beliefs, what she thinks should be reflected in an American leader like the President of the United States. And you also have seen her really lean into something that she started to talk about a few days ago, and now she's really boiled down to this closing message, an argument, which is that she says if Donald Trump were to win, he will be going down a so-called enemies list, and that she is saying she has a to-do list for all the things that she wants to do. And last night, you really did see these these bipartisan overtures where she was trying to say that if Donald Trump is making that list of people that he views as his biggest critics and detractors, she's saying that even if there are people who disagree with her, she wants to invite them to her table to be a part of giving her real-time feedback and ideas, and to maybe be a part of her administration by appointing a Republican in the cabinet and to have this bipartisan council of advisors. So she's going to take what she really tried to project last night and now repeat it again in these different stops in the battlegrounds. And then, of course, Chris, as you know, there is a major message about just getting out the vote, making a plan to vote, taking advantage of early voting where it's possible and where it may be wrapping up soon. And that's the other main aim. And you see in trying to build these crowds, last night she had tens and tens of thousands of people here in Washington. They're still trying to make that a big priority in these battleground states in the closing days, to have big crowds, big turnout, and then again try to translate that into voters and supporters that they hope show up for her in terms of the campaign's ideal scenario on Tuesday, Chris.
Monica, thank you for that. You know, Jess, Trump always talks about MAGA as a movement, and he was thrilled on Sunday at Madison Square Garden, packed to the rafters. But then when you saw the size of Harris's crowd last night, larger than the crowd that Trump drew on January 6th, we might say, and it seemed like her campaign was messaging, this is a movement too. And I want to read what one woman told USA Today. I couldn't just sit on my couch. I am a black woman attorney. I'm a descendant of enslaved people. I am a history buff who knows my family's history. There's so many reasons why I came today to support her. I felt like I couldn't sit at home. And I wonder, as people watch this, can that be motivating itself in these final days, as if to say to them, you can be a part of this?
For sure. 100%. I mean, that is the message that she is closing with, that all of her surrogates are closing with, that the door is open, the table is here and set, and she is inviting people who agree with her, who disagree with her. She's galvanized more Republicans than anyone I've ever seen in my lifetime that's running for president. People who are not just supporting, but are out there campaigning for her. People like Liz Cheney and others. She is giving people a home that they felt they have not had. People who do not agree with Donald Trump's racism and the hate that he's been spewing for this past decade. They are looking for a home, and she is saying this can be it. And so she is engaging the traditional Democratic base. She's building a winning coalition, but she's inviting others who have been looking for a place for common sense, a place that can turn the page. And I think the thing that she said in that speech that really landed is this promise of America. And we saw it visually in the crowd. We see it in the crowds around the country that are coming for her, which I'm sure is getting under Donald Trump's skin. But we also see it in the substance. These are issues that people have been talking about for a long time. And she's saying together we can solve them. We have to do this together. I think we're going to keep hearing that. And I think as we get down to the wire and people are, again, going on feels, this sort of like game time decision here at the end, if they're not early voting, it's going to be about how they feel. And the more momentum this campaign shows towards the end, people want to be a part of this, and I think they will be.
It's almost like there's a shift, Eddie, because her campaign and Kamala Harris herself, didn't want to say for a long time anything but that we cannot take anything for granted. This is going to be an incredibly tight race. We're not going to say what the outcome is going to be. And now, today, saying we will win. And that sign that has the message she's had from the beginning, when we vote, we win. It does feel, when you hear the chants of the crowd, when you see the signs and the message repeated, that it does feel a bit more like a movement, and a successful one. That seems to be her message.
Well, it might not be a movement, but it's certainly a historical moment. A moment that calls each of us to take responsibility for democracy. What she did yesterday last night was so powerful. As a prosecutor, she didn't have a poster board with a timeline. She took the entire American public to the crime scene and reminded us that Donald Trump was an insurrectionist who threatened the very foundations of democracy. She told us very clearly the danger he presents, the dangers we face. And so the moment calls us, the historical moment calls us. And so what we saw was a tentativeness, right? We can't be too confident because she understood what happened in 2016. But as we move to November 5th, Let's get that enthusiasm stoked. Let's get those feels right. And let's do what history calls us to do. And that is take responsibility for democracy and move into it and turn the page, as she says, turn the page.
Yeah. And the other thing, Eddie, is that, she was not afraid to say, I don't know everything. I'm not perfect. I'm going to bring in other people. I'm going to talk to people who don't agree with me, which in and of itself is such a huge contrast, right, to the way Donald Trump has been. But also, you recently wrote about your decision to vote for her, not because you see her as a cure for all of America's problems, but as a way, as you wrote it, buying time. Is it important to set expectations for voters as well as giving them hope?
Right. And so I was really writing that piece for myself and for my leftist and progressive friends. You don't have to view Kamala Harris as a savior. That's wrong. We don't have to see your vote for her as settling the question around the carceral state or ending the horrors in Gaza. But what we do know, and this is from James Baldwin, is that the context for our voting has to be understood strategically, Chris. And that part of the time, most of the time when we vote, we're voting to buy ourselves some time, as he put it, so to watch so that the tide can turn, so that the tide may turn. And so in this moment, we know what a Donald Trump presidency will look like. What would it mean to organize and struggle for a more just world under Donald Trump? And what would it mean to organize and struggle for a more just world under Kamala Harris? I think the latter would be more conducive than the former.